Okay, it's 7 o'clock. This is a meeting of the Portsmouth Design Review Board. I'd just like to take a quick roll call of the members that are present this evening. Looking at the screen, I see Brendan Abbott, who is a naval architect with Sparkman and Stevens. Cynthia Bogart, which is a concerned citizen and a COVID recovery patient, thankfully. Nick Avery is a historic landscape architect. And who else is on? I can't read it from here.
It's Kevin Alverson
Brandon, that's the applicant.
and Steve Carr and Jean Haggerty.
Okay, so with the 4 members right now, we have a quorum. So we'll dispatch with reading of the minutes from the last meeting if we can get a vote on that from one of our members. So we can move into this petition.
Oh, I don't think that's on our agenda.
Oh, I didn't put it on, I'm sorry.
So we have, yeah, something like that. We have roll call first, which is the new business.
Then the new business, let's go straight to new business then. So this petitioner, which is West Main Road Solar 2, has previously been before us. At the time, we had wanted them to come back with a revised plan, and Jean Haggerty was nice enough to agree to that. And so Jean, if you could walk us through what changes you've made that we kind of requested at that time.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. So when we spoke about 2 weeks ago, there was a couple of issues with the plan that we were still working out. Specifically, one of them was related to wetlands on the site. Since that meeting, we've had the wetlands flagged, and we have adjusted the site layout a bit. So if you go to the next, that sheet, one more sheet over. So right down the middle of the plan, you'll see a line that's where the wetlands are. To the right is where the actual wetlands flags are, and the darker line is actually the buffer zone. Okay, so we're trying to stay away from the wetlands, and as a result of that, we moved them inland, so they came more to the west since last time we talked to you. That changed the array at the southeast side of the array. We moved that a bit, and it resulted in some of the panels moving to the top left. So that northwest corner has a little more panels, and we've gotten further away from the wetlands. So as a result of that move, we also made some adjustments to the landscape plan. And as we talked about at the last meeting, that was one of the big concerns, is that the screening be appropriate, and that we basically can make sure that we screen from all the different residential properties and from the roadside. We did mention that on the top right-hand corner, that is the ramp from the highway. And the wetlands all flow in that direction, so that we're not having to move anything related to drainage or anything on the street side. It'll all be on the inland side. So tonight we have Kevin Alverson with us. He has revised this plan, taken into consideration your comments on the evergreens and plantings and locations. And I'm just going to have Kevin quickly give you an update of what he's changed from the last submittal.
Good evening, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. My name is Kevin Alverson. I'm a landscape architect registered in the state of Rhode Island, office based out of Wickford, Rhode Island. I wasn't able to attend at the last hearing. However, I did review the board's comments on the landscape plan, and as Jean had mentioned, responded to also the modifications to the alignment of the array based on the revised wetland flagging. And what we were able to do was we modified the planting design in order to utilize more evergreen tree species, particularly along the southwest portion of the site, which abuts some of the residential areas. But as Gina had mentioned earlier, the modification to the solar array layout required some additional buffering that we have placed up along the northwest portion of the site. That's indicated at that kind of top left area of the site. And what we envision in that area is utilizing a mixture of eastern red cedar, and probably pitch pine as well, in particular. Maybe some white pine, but the area itself, I think, in order to provide a little bit more of a dense buffer, we envision using a lot more of the eastern red cedar in that area. Currently, that pink area that you see highlighted on the site, there is a considerable amount of eastern red cedar that's on the site currently. Seem to be hearing a little bit of feedback. Are you hearing that from your end?
I've got it. I'm hearing it, but not right now. Go ahead.
Not bad. I apologize for that. I'm not sure what may be happening, but with that pink area, there's a considerable amount of eastern red cedar, as well as some other pioneer species that you would typically see. By pioneer species, species of vegetation that grows in these sort of gravel pit areas. What we envision using is trying to reuse some of those as best as possible when the site clearing procedures start to happen. So we find that the trees there are very dense, and they're also doing very well in that area. So it makes sense to try to reutilize them as much as possible. However, based on how site conditions go about during the clearing procedures, we may need to supplement that with new vegetation as well. But in theory and in concept, that's what we're envisioning and doing. And also utilizing some of those, because there are so many of them, utilizing them in that southwest portion of the site also. The entrance road, which probably was explained to you previously, we did work with the project engineer as well to kind of adjust where that location is to utilize the existing access that's there, but also turn it so that we're minimizing any direct views off of West Main Road into the solar facility. And you can see on the western side of your screen that we're actually trying to utilize and supplement plantings in that area as well, so that we can minimize any views that come from the West Main Road portion of the site. In a nutshell, those are some of the revisions that we've made to the plans in response to the comments that we had, and also in response to the realigned wetland flagging that we had out there. But I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have on that behalf.
Why don't we start with any board member that would like to ask questions to Kevin?
So what's the depth of the planting from a residential property line to where, a dense vegetation would be? What's the depth of that?
Along the western and southwestern areas, we have a 50-foot no-cut buffer that's existing. Then we would have, on the western side where the roadway is a roadway, and then we'd have about a 15 to 20-foot planting area. In the southwest area, what we envision doing is having the no-cut buffer, a 50-foot minimum, and then having a 15-foot plus or minus planting area where we would have to cut down some of the vegetation in order to place the plantings in there. But between that supplemental buffering and where the fence line for the array would go, we would have another 50-foot to 75-foot or so area, what we're calling a selective clearing area, which would really require just the cutting of any larger tree vegetation. So anything over the height of, say, 12 to 14 feet, just with the interest of trying to minimize any shade casting that might happen onto the solar array. I did walk the site in late January, and although the condition of the site right now is kind of like old former gravel bank sort of, there's in that area along the southwest in particular, it is largely shrub vegetation and herbaceous vegetation at this point. The idea would be to allow that to revegetate outside of the fence line, but again, maintain that minimum or that maximum height of, say, 12 to 14 feet, so it doesn't cast a shade. On the north side of the site, we still are maintaining a 50-foot no-cut buffer, but in the northwest corner, as the vegetation is a little thinner in that area, we're proposing about a 20-foot wide, densely planted supplemental buffer in that area. As you go towards the northeast, we're maintaining all of that vegetation that's in there. It is fairly dense right now, Once clearing procedures go, commence out there, there may need to be some supplemental buffer if there are some view corridors that are shown into the site. But we see that as probably being minimal and needed, but we certainly will buffer as required.
So that corner, Kevin, the topography drops off pretty quick there. How, and I'm having a little bit of trouble reading the topography lines. What is, say from the fence to the abutter, to the closest abutter, like Jimmy Hall's house, for instance?
This is in the,
North, right, exactly right there. So I know you can't see this from the off ramp on 24, I've looked. And you really can't, you can't see any of the houses either.
Mm.
But my question is, if we lose some of this taller vegetation, is he gonna have a line of sight to it? Or are these replacement trees, the eastern red cedar, the pitch pine, or they'll grow in enough time, within enough time to block that, to give it greenery year round? Is that the premise behind cutting down some of the bigger trees?
yeah, at the northern portion of the site, we actually don't need to do any of that shade pruning because it doesn't cast the shade down onto the array. So quite literally where the line that you can see on your screen there that says TC, that's the tree clearing line. We don't envision any clearing, any shade pruning or anything necessary between the property line and that point. So the existing buffer from that limited disturbance and tree clearing line to the property line with Mr. Hall's property would remain as is. There is some pretty considerable cedar vegetation that's in there. So we don't anticipate having view lines into there, but it's certainly something that as the design is developed further and as we go along into it, if supplemental planting is necessary or replanting of some of those existing cedars that need to come out, that's going to be something that we'll be looking to do as part of this.
Any other board members have any questions? Brendan, anybody?
I just wonder if there, from the town side, is there any definitions the town uses with regard to density? I'm not a landscape architect, but like density of plantings that would have to be met. Or I don't know how you measure that, how you review that. As I brought up in the last meeting, I think my biggest concerns is just buffering this from neighbors. So, the research I did between last meeting and this meeting looked like 50 feet of a no-cut zone is pretty good. And then I saw some of the things I found were another 100 feet to the beginning of any kind of manufacturing thing. So 150 feet offset from a residential property to some sort of manufacturing or light industrial, anything. So I think the 50 feet of dense growth is good. I just don't know how you quantify that. Just because I don't know anything about it. It's not my profession.
Nick, could you weigh in, or I don't think Leslie has had a chance to join us yet. She's driving back from Providence and was going to try to call in.
Yeah, I guess if I could step in just to hopefully respond to that. I've done several of these facilities, and just the nature of the beast, I suppose, when it comes to planting a visual buffer. It's I guess distance and width is it's really dependent on what the vegetation is within those areas. So the type of buffer that we're proposing is something that's a staggered sort of multiple buffer. So it doesn't necessarily look like a green wall per se. So in some really tight situations, I've been able to accomplish that buffer in as little as 10 to 15 feet. And other ones, because we have more room to be able to move, which is what the scenario is in this case. We can kind of utilize the spacing a little bit better, and also what's existing out there, sort of planting within and around other vegetation that's meant to remain in order to really cut down those sight lines. As you can imagine, until you actually, we can conceptualize it and develop the buffer to the best of our ability. Until we actually take those trees down, we'll be actually able to see. We'll do everything in our power to minimize any of the removal of those vegetation, but then we'll be able to see if you need to have a tree here, 15 feet this way as opposed to 6 feet that way. That's the sort of on-site buffer development that we like to do.
Any other questions from any of the board members at this point? Is there any interested parties, abutters that would like to speak at this time? Mike is clicking on.
So if you would like to give public comment, you can use the raise your hand feature on the Zoom app.
No response. So if I could do maybe a quick summation, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, that we've delineated, or you've delineated to the south and east, the wetlands. The array has moved a little bit up to the north. You're proposing a more deep vegetation along the north side, eastern cedars, pitch pine. You have kept the original opening coming off of West Main Road, which by the way I like, because it's dangerous up there trying to get in there, but also you're not making a second cut. It's already there. It probably has to be widened a little bit for visibility, but what else did we cover that members would like to add that I didn't include in our opinion?
I would love to get some input from Leslie maybe on just a more quantifiable definition of what dense planting is. I don't know the correct terminology. I found a paper from Planning Advisory Service from 1960 from Chicago that kind of uses some, they put some numbers on things and some zones, and if there's any way we could help define what's appropriate for the town of Portsmouth by advising the zoning board and the planning board, I think that would be useful for our opinion.
So
From what I found is 50 feet no cut, that's dense, and 100 feet beyond that to any sort of light manufacturing.
So what I will do this evening when I get back to my home office, I'll draft our opinion for the board members to review. And by that time, Leslie will have a chance to look at it. As our petitioners know, she's our registered landscape architect. So not having her here, she might be able to answer that question. So it'll be in the email or the preliminary draft that I send out tonight. And please, everyone on the board respond, and I'll make sure Leslie gets her 2 cents in on and tries to answer that question on the dense plantings.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there any other questions, concerns that anyone wants to bring up tonight?
And this is Jean, just a quick question about next steps. So these plans, with your opinion, will be forwarded on to the planning board for their meeting on the 14th. Do we need to submit anything else? Are you okay with where we are at?
No, that's fine. You've submitted enough of the materials that satisfy the master plan checklist with the planning board.
Okay. Good, thank you.
So if there's no other questions or comments, we'll adjourn the meeting for tonight. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you.